the Mount Rushmore of Heel Turns. We like it so much, we're going to bring it back for part 2 this week. So what I'm going to do is I want to give all of you new viewers some context. If you haven't seen that video, number 1, go back and check it out. It's a whole lot of fun. It's on a bunch of playlists on our YouTube channel. Very easy to find. In fact, Andy, let me say this. I texted you this and I couldn't believe it. I kid you not, I Googled the term Mount Rushmore of wrestling heel turns. Google. You know what came up? The very first thing that came up was Squared Circle Radio and our video. Just blew my mind. That's insane.
It's still there too, by the way. I just looked it up.
Good.
It's still the number 1 search.
That is wild to me. And we can't do that without you people
wild.
viewing
it's
it.
It's all because your dad was on there.
That's true. Shout out to Pops.
He's our Charlotte Flair. He's our Flair in the bank.
He is our Flair in the bank.
When we need views, we just cash it in.
That's it. He's our Flair in the bank. I love it. So what I'm going to do right now is, number 1, go back and watch that video. Number 2, I'm going to recap the heel turns that we talked about first so that our new viewers don't think, oh, they're talking about heel turns and they're not talking about this one. Or how are you missing that one? Well, we may have already talked about it last week. So let me run through which ones we talked about. Then we got a lot of comments on that video. I'm going to run through some of those suggestions because I told our viewers and our listeners that I would, because they were gracious enough to comment. So I'm going to run through some of those as well. Then Andy and I are going to bounce a few back and forth. And at the end of this segment, Andy and I are going to pick who we think belongs on the Mount Rushmore of heel turns. Guarantee you, Andy and I are going to have, I don't want to say 4 completely different ones, but there will be a difference in our spots for sure. So let me run through these. Of course, you can't talk about the Mount Rushmore of heel turns without talking about Hulk Hogan trading in the red and yellow for black and white and leading the NWO. That happened at Bash at the Beach 1996. Throw it back to 1992, the barber shop window, Shawn Michaels launching Marty Jannetty through that, something that wrestling fans just hadn't seen anything like that up to that point, but we talked about that. We also talked about Seth Rollins being the plan B and turning his back on his Shield brothers. Andy, this was in 2014, right? Do I have
14.
that? 14? Yeah. 2014,
yep.
The chair shot heard around the world. We saw it come back up even at WrestleMania this year. So a massive heel turn. A heel turn that we talked about that maybe doesn't get enough love is Eddie Guerrero turning on Rey Mysterio in 2005. And if that wasn't enough for poor Rey, Dominic turned on him as well. His own son, well, Eddie Guerrero would argue that, but Dominic Mysterio also turning on Rey Mysterio, a very underrated one, if you ask me. We also talked about the Macho Man Randy Savage breaking up the Mega Powers, turning on Hulk Hogan ahead of WrestleMania 5. Speaking of Hulk Hogan, ahead of WrestleMania 3, the big man Andre the Giant, who I'm not sure, but I think had never been heel before up to this point. He turns on Hulk Hogan to set up their massive match. We also talked about a heel turn that probably should have never happened, and that is Stone Cold Steve Austin shaking hands with the devil himself, Vince McMahon aligning himself there in 2001, and then a heel turn that I can't believe I forgot to bring up. Kevin Owens turning on Chris Jericho at the Festival of Friendship. So many great heel turns. Now let me run through one that was in the comments, Andy, that I can't believe that I forgot to bring up. Just absolutely baffles my mind. And that is the infamous double turn at WrestleMania 13, where Stone Cold Steve Austin entered that match as a heel, but Bret the Hitman Hart finished it as a heel, and it sparked his run as a babyface in Canada, but a heel everywhere else. It was incredible the way that they were able to do that at WrestleMania 13. I can't believe I forgot to mention that one, but one of our listeners brought that up, an incredible heel turn. You weren't on the show last week. I'm going to throw to you. What kind of heel turn can you bring up today?
Well, there's another one I can't believe you guys forgot, but I'll forgive you. And also, my list, just so I preface this with every wrestling list at Mount Rushmore we do, is I am the younger one, so a lot of modern things are going to be on my list because that's just what I've resonated with and seen. But this was like one of the first ones that I remember of like, it's still like laughs with me. They just redid it in a way as Mark Henry turning on John Cena and the fake retirement. Like that is an iconic moment that not only do we remember the heel turn, but then it was like, it led to Mark Henry's best run of his career with the Hall of Pain, like era and everything else. It was done so well against a perfect guy like John Cena. The only thing I would say goes against it is he didn't beat Cena for the title. He should have. But other than that, like it was done to perfection.
Yeah, that was one of the heel turns that was left in our comments that we didn't bring up. So I had that graphic ready. I was going to bring it up if you did. I anticipated you would bring that one up. But I had that graphic ready to go. Yeah, I can't believe we forgot that one either. Just a fantastic heel turn. AJ Styles recreating that pretty recently and just done in a masterful way. I wasn't a huge fan of Mark Henry, and I don't want to say I wasn't a fan of that run because it was the best run of his career. You said it. Everybody knows that. It just, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Mark Henry fan, but it's fine. He's fine. It's good. Let me tell you another one, another old school one that I can't believe that we didn't bring up. Heading into WrestleMania 7, Sergeant Slaughter, the G.I. Joe, the American soldier, becomes an Iraqi sympathizer. I cannot believe we didn't bring this up because he had to have so much security when he went to all these buildings. They had to arguably move WrestleMania 7 from an outdoor venue to an indoor venue because they were scared that somebody was going to attack Sergeant Slaughter. You talk about heel turns. It don't get more real than that.
No, it does not. Let me ask you this one because you remember these better than I do.
Yes.
Was that worse than Jim Duggan turning to Canada?
Yes. Yes, it was.
When he turned heel, and that one to me is funny though. Like the Sergeant Slaughter one is in our modern day does not look the best.
No.
And like the whole gimmick does not look great at all.
No.
But for that time period, it was like when kayfabe was still like alive and well. Like it got hairy for a while for him.
That happened in 1991. So I think it was, history buffs can correct me. I think it was Desert Storm. I don't remember for sure, but that was like the edgiest thing that the WWF had ever done at that point, especially wrapping up the real world into this and just wild. Just wild. All right, give me another heel turn that resonated with you.
Yeah, so I think the story going into this one and the night that it actually happened has a lot of impact. Everything that happened afterwards was not great, but just the moment that it happened. That was Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose turning on Seth Rollins the night Roman Reigns announced he had leukemia. That's one of those nights that the call Michael Cole had of all nights, why tonight?
Yep.
Like you should not have done this tonight. It was done so impactfully the whole time. Seth Rollins was saying it's okay as he's just getting beaten down by Mox. That's one of the ones that I remember very fondly. When I talk about heel turns, it's one of the first ones that pop up because it was just on such a wild night to do it. But then when they did it, it worked so well. Everything afterward just kind of fell apart.
It really did. Seems like a very Vince McMahon thing to do. I hate to put it in those terms, but it just seems like a very Vince thing to do because this thing had legs. Like, I'm not arguing that it shouldn't have happened that night because clearly it was the most impactful happening that night. But this thing had legs, man, and they just dropped the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we're talking about like the turn itself,
Yes.
I mean this is one of those that like I think a lot of people remember very very fondly.
I think that, yeah, you can make that argument of if you're talking about the Mount Rushmore of heel turns, are you talking about the moment or what happened after the moment? You know, so like with Brett and Austin, the moment that it happened, it was cool, but what it springboarded after that was far more impactful than the actual moment itself. Whereas Hulk Hogan turning heel, like at, joining the NWO, that moment, yes, it springboarded an incredible run, but that moment was just humongous because nobody expected it,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And I think kind of along that lines, I'll throw another one out real quick. That doesn't get talked about a whole lot because it wasn't on a major American promotion. But it's the night that Prince Devitt, Finn Balor formed Bullet Club. And he has been a babyface his whole run, turned on his tag partner, was joined by Bad Luck Fale, and then joined by Carl Anderson and Tama Tonga. I mean, we talk about how impactful the NWO was across a lot of like promotions and brands and everything else. The Bullet Club has kind of been the modern day version of that, of guys like AJ and Cody and Kenny and Adam Cole and the Young Bucks and Adam Page. And like, you can just Jay White, you can keep running through the list of people who were a part of Bullet Club. And none of that started unless Prince Devitt turned heel on his tag partner in Japan.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly NWO inspired, you would say, but like the Bullet Club, like you said, it's transcended the modern era of wrestling. It's touched so many lives and done all the things and really set up a bunch of guys to be successful for their whole career.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We've gotten a bunch out of the way. We've talked a whole lot, but now it's time to name our 4. Now, all the ones that we talked about earlier, obviously they can be included. We're going to name our 4 spots on our Mount Rushmore. Andy, give me one that has to be on your Mount Rushmore.
I think this one is going to be on a lot of people's. I'm sure it's going to be on yours as well. I'm not a huge fan of the guy, but when moments like this happen, it literally changed the wrestling world forever. And that is Hogan joining the NWO, turning heel. That's just that moment it defined wrestling in the that era for a long time. And so I think it has to be on this list.
And I mentioned it earlier, not only was this moment impactful, but much like we talk about Shawn Michaels having 2 Hall of Fame careers, Hulk Hogan had 2 Hall of Fame careers, and dude was already a first ballot Hall of Famer as it was, and then he turned heel, and he just incredible. No matter what you feel about the guy, his backstage politics, his personal beliefs, what have you, the dude knew what he was doing when it came to wrestling. And dude saw the writing on the wall with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, took advantage, traded in his red and yellow for black and white, and you can't have a Mount Rushmore of heel turns without the NWO and Hulk Hogan. All right. I'll give you one that's on because that one is certainly on my list. You said it, of course. I'll give you the second one on my list. And again, Mount Rushmore is not a 1, 2, 3, 4 order. It's just our top 4 in any order. And the one I'm going to give you is the other one that when I say heel turns, it has to be on a list. There's just no question about it. It's the Barbershop. It's Shawn Michaels. It's Marty Jannetty. Not only did the most popular tag team of that era, the Rockers, break up in a dramatic way, somebody getting thrown through a window with something that hadn't really been seen on TV, and then it sparked the singles career of the greatest professional wrestler of all time. In ring, overall, doesn't matter. I'll believe that to the day that I die. The career of Shawn Michaels starts right here at the Barbershop.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to argue with that. This one is not on my Mount Rushmore, but it's like just on the outside.
I was gonna say, can you at least make it an honorable mention?
No, it's definitely an honorable mention. Like it's one of those, it created and made who Shawn Michaels was
Yep.
during his first run.
Yep.
And so it's hard to argue, in these breakups, sometimes one person will get, leaped over the other one. Everybody always makes the joke, who's the Marty Jannetty of the group? Who's the weak member of the group?
Yep.
But just the moment of the heel turn itself is crazy.
All right, give me your second. If that one's not on your list, give me your second one. What you got?
I'll give a modern day version of that in some ways. And that is Kevin Owens turning on Chris Jericho with the list. I mean, it's one of those that we all saw coming when they announced that they were doing the Festival of Friendship or whatever it's called.
Yep.
And it was one of those that we all saw it coming, but it didn't take away from the moment of when Jericho raised the list and said, "Why is my name on it?" And it says KO's list, and he turns on him. It was done so well, and that was such a group that we, like, two people we love to see together, and to see how how they broke up and how everything fell apart was just amazing to see. So this one had to be on my list.
I think this storyline helped send Kevin Owens into a new stratosphere, because I think there were a lot of people who were upset that he was Universal Champion for even as long as he was. It's like, why in the world is he champion? Now, people who followed his career before and people who were fans of NXT, they knew. Jericho saw it in him. Jericho knew. So this propelled, I can't even get it out, propelled Kevin Owens into new heights. I think it's the best storyline Jericho has ever done. I mean, you see people, they quote Y2J and they do whatever, Learning Tree or whatever he's doing now. But when you make the list, like, everybody knows that. And it's so cool. But for me, it's an honorable mention just because, yes, it propelled Owens. Yes, it was the best work Jericho ever did. But I don't think it took them anywhere after that, if that makes sense.
Because of one person.
That's right.
And this is for Levi, who listens to our show. This is for one person, and that's Goldberg. This is the era of me starting to really hate Goldberg, was because of what happened right after this heel turn. But if we're talking about the turn itself, I mean, this one's hard not to at least be in the honorable mention area. It's like, to me, it's like the Rockers turning.
Absolutely. No. So I don't even blame Goldberg. It was Vince's call, which is sad because if you listen to the podcast last week when Dad and I were talking about this, I said it, that Triple H did not want this angle to happen. Like, Vince wasn't at TV that week. Triple H didn't want it to happen. Jericho had already gotten it approved through Vince, so Jericho had to call Vince to get it made right so that this angle could happen. And then the blow-off was supposed to be Jericho beats Owens for the Universal title at WrestleMania. And then Vince woke up one day and said, nah, Goldberg's going to win it. Goldberg and Brock for the title. Okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
All right. I'll give you my third. And I'm going to go modern as well. This one might be on your list and it might not. The moment itself was quite impactful, but it's what happened afterwards that makes this heel turn on my list. And that is Roman Reigns aligning himself with the wise man, Paul Heyman. Now, the reason that this moment itself is not as impactful is because it was during the pandemic. It happened backstage. It was a contract signing, whatever. But we talked about it early in the show, how big of a babyface, how big of a heel, how big of a character Roman Reigns is now. And it does not happen unless he aligns himself with Paul Heyman. It belongs on my Mount Rushmore for that reason.
Yeah, it's another one. It's on the outside for me. It's on the honorable mention, but it was in heavy, like it came close to being on my list.
Okay.
And I really I think the pairing is great. Obviously what it's done for Roman Reigns. It's his first big heel turn, like all of that. I think it was done so well. The pandemic era kind of, to me, Roman Reigns doesn't start until the crowd's there, really. And when the crowd's reacting. And so that's the hardest part for me, is that pandemic era, which is not anybody's fault. Like,
Sure.
there's nothing nobody could do about it. But yeah, it's hard to deny that moment of Roman sitting there, and they just pan over, and there's Paul Heyman, and it's like, oh, we're actually putting these guys together.
Yep.
Like, that was really cool.
All right, so what's your third? If that one's not on your list, what do you got?
I'll stick with the group, though. I mean, Seth turning on the Shield was such a big moment because nobody saw it coming.
Yep.
I thought we had a lot more time with the group. I thought the Shield had a lot more time to go. And if anybody was going to turn, it was going to be Dean Ambrose. Like, Dean Ambrose was going to be the heel coming out of the group. Roman and Seth were going to be the baby faces. And when Seth hit Roman for the first time, I mean, you can hear like the crowd literally yell no when he does it. It's such an impactful moment. This night, like, the Shield obviously is one of the best. I think it's the best trios group of all time. However, this moment solidified all three guys as main event level guys.
Yeah, it did. It just falls outside of my top four. It is probably my number 5. If there was one that I wrestled with the most of going back and forth, it's this one because of what it did for all three guys. Sent them all to main event status, as you talked about. I think if the Shield, and maybe it's a byproduct of I wasn't watching regularly at the time, but I feel like if the Shield would have had more time, like you talked about, this could have projected into my top 4. Obviously, I can't change that, but I think that would have helped solidify this a little bit more for me. But it's an incredible moment. Again, it just falls outside my top 4. Let me tell you what my number 4 is, and you can call me a homer if you want to. But 2002, the reformation of DX, that did not happen, and it led to the second run of the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels when he got pedigreed in the middle of the ring by Triple H. Not only did it lead to Shawn Michaels in his second Hall of Fame career, but it led to the reign of terror of Triple H, basically being world champion from 2002 to 2005. This is the moment that set the whole thing up. Yes, Triple H was a heel before, but turning on his best friend, I was watching it live. It was heartbreaking.
Well, led to arguably one of the greatest SummerSlam matches of all time, too.
The greatest SummerSlam match of all time. I'll go to the bank with that one.
It's crazy. It's not on my honorable mention list, but it's a pivotal moment. I'll give my honorable mention, and then I'll give my fourth one.
Yeah.
My last honorable mention is one that it works so well, and it's not one that I don't think is talked about a lot, and that is Batista turning heel on Rey Mysterio.
Okay.
I think that's one of the moments of Batista just looking at him with the microphone and says, "I'm going to hurt you now," and just absolutely obliterates Rey Mysterio. I think it's one of those that needs a little bit more love. But my fourth spot, I said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again. Mark Henry going heel on John Cena, I think, has to go up on the Mount Rushmores of heel turns, just because of how realistic the promo was, how realistic the retirement speech was, everything. And then all of a sudden he goes to hug Cena and just world's strongest slams him and just beats him down. And it's a moment that just lives forever. So I this has to be on my list.
I mean, I don't think it's not in my honorable mentions, but I think that's because I'm so down on Mark Henry. But again, it's the moment. It's a fantastic moment. Mm-hmm. They had him hook, line, and sinker. And I mean, again, this list is speculative anyway. It's your opinion. I can't tell you you're wrong. And I mean, it's an incredible list. Again, you can't argue with that. We hope you guys have enjoyed part 2 of the Mount Rushmore of heel turns. Again, if you missed part 1, go back in our archives on our YouTube channel. It's on our Kicking It Old School playlist. You can check it out there. It's also on our Squared Circle Radio Clips playlist. Go find it there. see what we talked about last week with my dad, and then wrap it up with this one.